Everything clear?
Everything clear.
Excellent. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Rebecca Blake Thompson. I'm a senior contributor for content and education at Remake, and I'm also a very proud LA ambassador and organizer. You can find my sustainable fashion activism on Instagram at Belle Blake Thompson. And welcome to our May community call. We're so excited that you're here. So as people settle in, I'm going to play a short clip on who Remake is and what we do. Please, throughout the call, pay attention to the chat. We're going to be putting important links to the things that we're speaking about so that you can click on those and find ways to engage and find more information. And also note that you can input questions in the Q&A function in the chat as well, and we'll be paying attention to those. So here's a quick video on who Remake is and what we do. I hope you enjoy.
My name is Aisha Berenblatt, and I am the founder of Remake. At Remake, we're focused on igniting a conscious consumer movement to make fashion a force for good.
To make just one pair of jeans takes 680 gallons of water. Most of our clothes end up sitting in landfills for 200 years. But the biggest cost is really human.
Remake is focused on giving millennial women who love fashion practical ways to buy better, to truly wear her values, and to get to know the invisible millennial counterparts, the thousands of women who make our clothes in factories around the world.
So welcome to those of you who are just joining us. As you saw, Remake is an advocacy organization, and we are focused on making fashion a force for good. Our For Women by Women movement is made up of designers, creatives, artists, writers, activists, and most importantly, organizers who are working very hard to hold the fashion industry accountable for the staggering impacts that it has on women quite specifically, and on our planet. So we usually host these calls for the internal Remake community to share updates with our ambassadors and, activate our campaigns. But in light of the developments for COVID-19, and the need for virtual connection more than ever, we understand the value of connecting as a human family and spreading the message about what we're doing. So we've been making these calls public to share the impact that the pandemic is having on the fashion industry, and in particular on the makers of our clothing. For those of you who joined our April call, you will recall that we first focused our attention right here at home in Los Angeles on what was happening to garment makers here. There are more than 45,000 garment workers, mostly women, making our clothes here in Los Angeles. And there's often the assumption that made in America equals ethical and sustainable production. But that's not always the case. On our April call, we heard from the Garment Workers Center's director, Marissa Nuncio, that garment makers had been laid off without being paid owed wages due to this pandemic, and that even before the pandemic, garment makers in Los Angeles were already being paid on average less than $6 an hour for what was usually up to about 60 hours a week of work. Due to COVID-19, many of these garment makers have found themselves without wage payments or access to other employment due to strict shelter-in-place laws in the state of California. But because much of the LA garment maker workforce is undocumented, they also cannot apply for stimulus checks or unemployment. So the Garment Workers Center has reported that a lot of their workers have transitioned away from normal clothing production to the production of PPE, yet without their own PPE protection or social distancing or sanitation measures in place to protect them. So we used the April call to kind of rally our community and support the efforts of the Garment Workers Center, who started the Garment Worker Relief Fund to provide rent and food assistance to these garment makers in need. We are very excited to report that the Garment Workers Center has raised over $32,000 for this fund. $17,000 came in from crowdsourcing donations from anywhere between $5 and $250 from people like you. So $20,000 of that has already been distributed to more than 100 families of garment makers, with ongoing funding and distribution taking place right now and throughout the month of May. So please see the link in the chat. Caroline's going to put that in now, to support the Garment Worker Fund. And in any way that you can, even if you can just contribute a couple dollars, that's always valuable, but you can also use your voice through social media to spread the word about this campaign, as we have seen the great influence that can have. And that's something that we hold particularly valuable here at Remake, is using your voice as part of your activism. So today, we're going to switch gears and we're going to turn our attention to Bangladesh. And as some of you know, but many of you may not, because a lot of you are outside of our fashion community, and we're so glad that you're here today. Last week marked the 7-year anniversary of Rana Plaza, where more than 1,100 garment makers lost their lives while sewing for brands like Walmart, Primark, Children's Place, and other brands. The image that you see on the left of your screen is of the building collapse that took those 1,100 lives and injured thousands more. We had a wonderful photojournalist from our community, Claudio Casillas, go back to Rana Plaza site this year, where he captured the image you see on the right. And now you can see that it's bare. And while it looks overgrown with lush leaves due to the monsoon season, and this kind of gives it a peaceful look, he noted that normally it's just a bare dirt pit that is still strewn with the garbage from the wreckage and actually still littered with fashion labels of many of the brands who produce their clothing there. So while the brands and their PR teams have moved on from this tragedy, the families of the fallen certainly have not. And we have not either. This is still incredibly important to us and something that, we want to continue to shine a light on. Down the road from Rana Plaza, there's a makeshift memorial made by the victims' family members. And we as activists will also never forget that in the context of COVID-19, many of these same brands, CNA, who is also involved in the Tazreen fire, Walmart, Primark, who are producing in Rana Plaza, have once again turned their backs on the women who make these clothes, refusing to pay their bills, leaving workers food insecure, housing insecure, and protesting on the streets. I'm going to do a check-in with you. Aisha, is Nazma here?
She sure is. She was having a few technical difficulties, but she's here. So why don't you go ahead and add her as a panelist. And hello to everyone who's joining as Rebecca does that. I'm Aisha, the founder of Remake. And today, as Rebecca pointed out, we're going to turn our attention to Bangladesh. We're really excited to welcome Nazma, who is an amazing and fierce activist, the founder and executive director of Awaj.
So I'm going to promote Asma to a panelist. Allow me just a moment here.
And just a reminder for people as they're dialing in, we'll have some conversation between Nazma and I, but we really do want to keep this interactive and open it up to questions shortly. As questions pop up when we're talking, please do put that in the Q&A box because we want to really hear what's on your mind.
a moment. Oh, excuse me. Allow me just a second, guys, here. I need to add Nazma as a participant, and it's not allowing me to do that while I'm sharing.
No problem. I think one of the things, that a lot of people asked us was, well, why Bangladesh? And I think I'll give you a little bit of context as Rebecca is bringing Nazma on. Those of you who know from our last community call, COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on women, particularly women of color. And so this is why when we focused in LA last month, we know that 50,000 garment makers had been severely impacted, in the context of Bangladesh. And there's Nazma. Hi, sister. Good to have you here. We are talking about 4.1 million garment makers, most of who are also women. Bangladesh, from an export total, I think it's about 31 billion is what's exported into the Western markets, and 82% of those exports are all garment. And so it's a very important industry for Bangladesh, and obviously it's a very important source of livelihood for women. Now that you have Nazma back, I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Nazma, thank you for being here. We're so excited to have you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. All my sisters are in the panel and participant, and thank you give me the opportunities. We are very sad and we are not very good position at this moment because, as you know, in COVID is affected in Bangladesh first in 8 March, the first case came, as immediately when Europe, America, Australia, Canada, who is producing goods in our country, they are taking very wrong and bad decision, which is affected our livelihood and our brother and sister in Bangladesh, because people are asking for canceling the order, suspension, and pending lot of issue. And now in a days they are also asking for the 10% to 30% discount. So this is very difficult and challenging, and also our company, because they have no production, they have no order, so that is why they wanted to pay also 60 to 65% salary. So the reality, that 4.1 million workers are working, and majority is female, and they are coming from the countryside to urban, rural migration to urban, and single women. They are, although we treated very cheap labor, low wages, but our girls are more earning whatever money, they're independent, they're changing their life. Like myself, I started work in the garments factory when age of 11 with my mother. Today I'm also representative our sector. I have like 65 union, I have like 13 CBA, or 80% female are also in the leadership, and they have collective bargaining, gender issue, all the things. Even the COVID now, the factory is open, or the safety issue about their wages issue. There is some change we have, but this COVID, the multinational fashion retailer, they killed our whole structure.
I know.
So
I think one of the things, Nazma, for people who are just joining, I'm going to give them a little bit of timeline, of context of what happened. And then what we really want to hear from you is what the impact has been, knowing that you talk to workers day in and day out. So for everyone who's just joining, in January, February, obviously China was the epicenter of the COVID-19 crisis. And one of the things that we realized very quickly is just how fragile supply chains are and how interdependent. Because as you know, Bangladesh does a lot of cut and stitch, a lot of trim. And so what we were hearing from Cambodia and Pakistan and Bangladesh was a lot of fabric shortages as early as February, because China's fabric mills were behind. Obviously, they were dealing with coronavirus. At that time, what a lot of brands and retailers in February were pressing Bangladeshi suppliers to do was, as quickly as possible, finish production. And so workers were working in February and March, even as early as early March, making the product. And the factories had essentially taken the credit to buy the fabric. Then obviously coronavirus became a global pandemic. And so what happened is that because this industry operates on debt and that a lot of brands don't actually pay for orders for 15, 30, up to 60 days post shipment. For some of them, it's only once sales are made that they'll pay back the factories. Factories were essentially in a bind because here were workers that had already been paid. There was fabric mills calling to say, you have to pay us for our fabric. Some of the orders had already been shipped to Europe and the US in February. Some of them were sitting in ports unclaimed in Europe. Inventory started to pile at the Dhaka airport. There was also outside of ports in warehouses, piles and piles of clothes. And so essentially what happened was by the end of March, a lot of workers were furloughed or laid off without being paid for work that they had done in February and March. So Nazma, I wanted to first start with, what were you hearing in February and March?
Thank you, Asha. Yes, you are right, because when the China...
We lost you for a bit. Okay. You're back. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. You are right, because in February, in January or end of December, when the COVID start in China, so in January, February, there is also lockdown in China, certain place and whole China. So we have two kind of business here. One is the oven, another is a knit. So knit, they can bring the yarn and make the thread, another, and make the fabrics. And mostly the jeans and the shirt or denim, what you make, that fabric need to become from China. So
Right.
Most of our factory also very scary and very vulnerable situation, because if they don't get the raw materials from China, they can send the goods. So because many of my union factory management owner also talk with me, how we can do, if we can get that, and how we have to pay the salary. We need to be automatically locked down if we don't have this. So this is one of the challenge. And then when Europe is locked down beginning of March or end of February, so immediately all the brand don't think about the supplier, don't think about the workers, because who are the key and pioneer is the workers. Without swing, nobody can profit. So
Right.
they are immediately cancel all the orders and suspension.
$3 billion worth of orders.
Then,
yeah, $3 billion worth of orders were canceled in February.
Yeah.
And
then the shipment has also goes to Europe, America, Canada, wherever,
Right.
and they are not also committed to pay immediately. And the supplier, they also immediately laid off the factory. Right. And the laid off, and number of thousands of workers are lost their job.
Mostly young women. Right,
Yeah,
and they are in the cities waiting to be paid for February and March, while their families are in the rural villages. And now in March, when Dhaka shut down, a lot of workers are trying to get home, right? So they are, without having severance, without having wages, having to walk hundreds of miles to get home, without access to healthcare, without an ability to socially distance.
So Aisha, I think that this speaks to specifically why you launched Pay Up. And so I'd like for you to speak to the viewers as well as why Remake chose to focus on Bangladesh for the Pay Up campaign.
Yeah, so, as Nazma Appa said, much like her organization that's really focused on women, we at Remake are a For Women, By Women movement. We've shared the data on how important the Bangladesh garment sector is for workers, particularly women who rely on this. One of the things that we got from Bangladesh very quickly was aggregate data. So we knew $3 billion worth of orders had been canceled. We knew that most of the workers that had been furloughed hadn't been paid partial wages. We also knew that workers who had been laid off had not been paid severance. And obviously, as the pandemic infections started to spread in the global south, this had us really worried. And so this is where really the power of the community comes in on how quickly we mobilize. So March 26th, the president of BGMEA, Dr. Rubana Haq, posted a message, a plea to the world to say, brands, please don't cancel orders. For the orders that have already been shipped and you've received them in February, pay us, we need to pay workers. For the orders where you're not accepting shipment right now, we'll keep them clean in the warehouses that they've already been produced. We've incurred the labor cost. Please pay for the orders in February and March, because otherwise we're going to have social unrest. We're going to have 4 million people out on the streets protesting. That was March 20th. On March 27th, we landed the pay up petition on change.org when I literally held up this makeshift sign. Oops, it's backwards. I didn't know, with so many people in the West worried about what was happening at home, whether or not you all were going to join us as sisters in solidarity. It's been heartening to see over 12,000 signatures on that pay up campaign to date. All of the brands, their CEOs and CFOs get an email every time one of us signs. Through our social media campaigning, through tagging the brands, we know that at this point we've reached 4.7 million people. We were so heartened to see, huge influencers, actors like Nat Kelly, Arizona Muse, Cameron Russell, Amber Valletta use their platforms for good to ask brands to pay up. H&M was the first brand to agree with some wrestling. Zara and Target joined the ranks. And at this point, we now have 13 brands that have agreed to pay up.
So,
meant 600 million in orders that has been paid back to Bangladesh for this lag. And our conservative estimates are that is $7.8 billion in terms of unlocked exports being paid in the global market. Obviously, as Nazma said, it's still a drop in the bucket in terms of how many brands have yet to pay up. But I do want the community to know that this is the power of activism and us coming together as a sisterhood. That who knew that those of us sheltering in place with our own job losses, that 4 million of you would hold back and say, hey, brands, pay up. And the work continues. Topshop is yet to pay up, Walmart, JCPenney, Kohl's, Gap. And so these are brands that really do have to pay up, because to Nazma's point, the situation remains very dire. And I think, Nazma, one of the things for everyone to understand would be, I know that some workers were paid when we were looking at data in April, but now obviously factories have opened up in May just because of economic desperation of needing to have the orders. But that puts workers at even more risk, because the curve in Dhaka and other places has nowhere flattened, and yet we've gone ahead and opened the factories. So Appa, what have you been seeing and hearing from the workers? Because I know you talk to them every day.
Actually, Aisha, thank you. Actually, in our country, in South Asia, the poor country like Bangladesh, we are not going to die with the coronavirus, but we will die with the starving, because our March when laid off, the April has no production, then we will not get the full salary, and even our supplier has big challenge, because previously if they shipment, they gave payment like 45 to 80 days. Right. But they are asking now 180 days. So right. Which is unfair purchasing practice also affected our workers, our women. And the lot of women are young and they are pregnant, and they have a single woman, they have no husband. So these girls are very difficult and crucial moment we are facing. And Bangladesh is quite, living cost is very high, and their wages, half of the salary goes for their house rent. So it's very difficult for us because of the wrong decision and unfair labor purchasing practice is very tough. And if you go to the Walmart yearly turnover, how much? Of course, our supplier also get the profit, but all the loser goes to the workers. Why? We are not getting profit share. We are not getting anything, but all the bad sheep is our thing. That is the problem. The global supply chain is not transparent, accountable, and everywhere is the corruption. That also make very difficult for the women. Even women, when they raise their voice, it's also challenge. when we fight for this, today I'm fighting for the workers, it's also make me limitation. Why I'm fighting only the women in Bangladesh? There is a lot of activists, lot of people, nobody's raised their voice, nobody's, and I'm in also trouble. So that is why we need to be very strong women platform globally and locally. How we have to, because few Aisha, few Nazma is not solve the issue. We need to be many, many Aisha, many, many Nazma. As long as we are not united, you are not raise our voice, and we need to be short-term, mid-term, long-term action plan, and we have to be very strong. We need to be solidarity. So whole globalization, militarization, capitalization, neoliberalization, they are abuse and exploit women, the workers, even the multinational who are in our country.
And
They
this is
are always asking for
absolutely. This is where some of the models where we said, look, we can't pay for marketing. We want you to support, pay up. Many of them said, absolutely, because this is where sisters within the fashion industry have to rise up in solidarity. And I think, for people understanding, listening in, I'd love to open it up for Q&A. Rebecca, one of the things that I did want to leave you all with was, look, the solidarity did work. 12,000 of you did sign the change.org petition. We did unlock 600 million in back orders in Bangladesh. But to Nazma's point, as we walk into May and the factories have opened, what we're hearing is, well, even the transportation for workers, they're not really able to socially distance. Some factories are saying, well, in the working stations, of course, we are going to make sure there's hand washing, there's temperature check. But the thing to understand also is this was really putting the women who make our clothes in a rock in a hard place to say, if I don't go into work, I'm not getting severance, I'm not going to be paid my partial wage if I was furloughed, so I have to go in, because now it's not just about protective equipment. All factories in Bangladesh, and it similarly has happened in Pakistan and other places, are now open. The factories are telling us, God willing, everyone will be okay, but we have no choice because, so many brands have yet to pay for even orders in February and March. And we know that there isn't going to be much demand. Many of us remain shelter in place. And so online sales will continue to be sluggish. Stores haven't opened. And so whatever we can make, if we don't do that, to Nazma's point, there is going to be economic starvation. And so one of the questions that's really been keeping me up at night is what's to happen as workers start to get sick? This is not a place where there is a lot of health infrastructure, and once she gets sick and she's not able to produce on the factory floor, then what's to happen to her? What's to happen to her dependents? And I think just leaving everyone with, to Nazma's point, as we're thinking about who are the brands, we've had a lot of empathy to say, okay, JCPenney, Kohl's, some of these brands are having their own financial troubles. But the thing to recognize is that we're not asking for charity. What we're asking is for simple good business practice, that these are orders that were already produced, that have either already been shipped or are waiting to be shipped. The work has already been done for these labels. And you also know that, for Walmart with bustling grocery sales, why is it that Asda is still to pay for its orders? CNA is wholly owned by a billionaire family, a German-Dutch family. Why is it that they are one of the biggest producers in Bangladesh that they're yet to pay for orders? A Cardiac Group, most of you will know Topshop, Beyonce's Ivy Park line came from there. Why is it that, Sir Philip Green, a billionaire, is not thinking about the workers in Bangladesh? And so this really is a time for solidarity, and let's go ahead and open it up for questions, Rebecca.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to field those. And I just also want to make a note to our viewers that, this continues to draw parallels to some of the situations we see at home in which, it's not just taking away not only that paycheck that the workers need immediately, it's the fact that there's no infrastructure in place to protect their health care, to provide paid sick leave, to provide for overtime pay, all of these kind of checks and balances that we try to put in place here to help, kind of buffer the blow when there is a catastrophe like this, that there's not access to these rights for most workers. And even though we here domestically have, these stimulus checks and things coming through, workers can't gain access to them. And in Bangladesh, these stimulus checks are not even enough to cover the wages that were already owed to them. So some of the questions that are
I think one clarification there, Rebecca, is that Mark, when they set up their worker fund, they said, oh, we'll make part of the calculation with the government bailout package. The language is really important. Bangladesh is offering is a soft loan with interest, which a lot of factories decided they couldn't take because they were already in an illiquid situation. And so for brands and theirs to be relying on either their own taxpayers' money to pay or to be relying on the Bangladeshi government to bail out for workers who have worked on their labels is simply not an equitable solution.
Absolutely. So one of the questions coming through in the chat from Marco, thank you, Marco, kind of touches on the fact that there's so many layers to how workers are distanced from the brands and how brands can purposefully distance themselves from the workers. And he's curious, what can these fashion companies do to ensure that the factories that they work with are ethical, care for their workers and things like that. So I'm sure both of you can speak to this. But, Nazma, I think we would love to hear from you in terms of workers in Bangladesh. How can brands choose to work with responsible factories that care for their employees?
And I think Nazma, the question was also about the unions in Bangladesh, obviously something that you are working so closely with. I know within Awaj Foundation, there's over 780,000 workers that you work with. So just explaining to people how the unions work in Bangladesh and how you work in particular with workers would be very helpful.
Thank you. Because in Bangladesh, after Rana Plaza, although we sacrificed our life in the building collapse or severely injured, but also there is, I'm not saying that a big percentage, but there is also hope. We got some union, we have number of union, but quality and quantity, but few we have also quality. Like for example, my organization, I have 65 union, one of the biggest workers, 8,000 workers. And I have 7,000 workers. I have 3,000. Also, I have like 1,500 workers. So these kind of things we have changed. And we, the worldwide, the male dominating union, politicized, many cases corrupted. So it's not also harmful for also industry, harmful for the also workers. So we are trying to different way to educate the workers about their rights and their responsibility. In the meantime, we are also educated the floor level management, top mid level, because how they can build their trust and make these things. So we have some CBA, we have some beyond the labor law, they got 10% salary increment, gender issue, etc. So these kind of things we are trying, and it's also, we are trying, even we were thinking, even the BGME president also, she was trying to work with us and show something success in our country. We were discussing also, but COVID, it's make us very difficult and things. So the brand should work who is really transparent and really well-being for the workers and really helpful for her, those kind of things. The brand has a main problem. Today also I talked with one of the supplier. The PVS said they are not canceling any order. But the challenge, they are not doing direct business with the all supplier. They are doing business with the sourcing company, different agency like Liang Fang, Texibo, and other. So that the supplier told me that I have problem, that I have no order in June. But what I will do, because I am a Muslim, I will be pay my worker salary and other things because I don't want it to be starving them. But what I will do, I said, why? Because the PBS is not cancel the order. But she said, I'm not direct do, but I do through the Liang Fund. So, this kind of things also going.
Right. The intermediaries make the transparency difficult because the supply chain is so fragmented. Right. And I think
Yeah.
people to understand, sometimes the onus and even the way this question was written or how you asked it, Rebecca, made it seem as though brands don't know or that somehow, this is all a problem on the factory end. And I think, we at Remake often talk about this reset moment where if we have to be thinking about the people who make our clothes truly as sisters in this solidarity movement, if we have to be thinking about suppliers truly as partners, then we really do have to understand how a lot of the risk is really pushed down from brands, and essentially they're asking the factories to bear the risk, right? The entire industry operates on debt. And brands, unless they have sales, are not paying for orders that have already been made. So the question is not really, finding the right supplier partner that's taking care of the workers, which is how you read the question. I think the actual question here is a lot of workers haven't been paid because brands haven't been paying their bills since February and March, and that they directly benefit from this debt situation that puts workers in a really precarious situation, because unless they're able to make sales, they don't actually pay for product that is produced. And so, we have been doing weekly coalition calls across different organizers, worker groups like NASMA's, as well as some suppliers. One of our partners, who's a sustainable denim factory, who's done everything right, who was a media darling, denim experts, Mustafiz, has shared with us that, his brands, even though he's truly sustainable, he's been paying workers from the beginning and hasn't opened the factory because he's worried about their safety. His brands haven't paid over $1 million worth of orders. So sometimes it's not about the brands choosing the right factory partners, it's almost the factory partners choosing the right brands.
And unfortunately, I think that speaks to the fact that, a lot of these factories just need what work they can get, and that is also, a systemic issue, that this race to the bottom that consumers have for ever decreasing prices on things forces the factories to continue to take orders, for more and more goods at less and less pay. You spoke to just now, Aisha, and so I think we should go into some more clarity. One of the questions in the Q&A and in the chat both talk about the lack of transparency through this tiered structure, and how brands might be saying that they are paying for orders, but maybe they're not saying when or how much of the orders they're paying for or to whom. So I'm going to kind of combine a few of the questions, but ultimately speak to how can we as consumers have more transparency about what brands are doing when they are being ethical, and if the workers are actually receiving the money that brands are promising to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really appreciate this question, Nazma. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on transparency. Transparency is not a silver bullet, but it really is the first step, because if we're working with good data, we really do have what's happening. And, when we were trying to get good data, a lot of suppliers and manufacturers, because, this issue is not specific just to Bangladesh. Certainly, there have been order in my home country of Pakistan, in Cambodia, in other places. Because of the buyer-supplier relationship and dynamic, it's been very difficult to get manufacturers to talk to press, to talk to our community, and share what's happening. Because essentially a lot of them are beholden to the big brands. And if they go out and share their screenshots of, generic emails with just all orders are canceled under the force majeure clause, we're not going to pay for back orders, they worry that it'll hurt the relationship and they won't get orders in the fall. And so that's very difficult. I see that Professor Mark Anner is on the call from UPenn University. We're really grateful to him, where he really looked at reams and reams of this data and was able to verify that the 600 million through the activism has been paid back to Bangladesh, and the 7.5 billion globally. So, there was some verification that we were able to do with suppliers, but then this is where Nazma is really important in talking to workers to say it's one thing for the factories to be paid, but we also know that 71% of at least the workers that were employed were paid in April thanks to the campaigning as well. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit about how you verify, workers being paid or not paid.
we are every day working with the workers, and every day we are communicate with our member, our different factory work connection. Even the people are coming through different sources also. So we got the all information and everything, and also we know what's going on and things. So the sad things that still we have because we are talking about the tier 1, tier 2 on the supply chain.
Right.
Also in
Not the
Bangladesh,
small, medium factories who are making for Forever 21 and the less well-known
yeah,
brand.
we have a small medium factory and also big factory. So a small factory who are doing subcontract or something, so it's very challenging for also them. The big factory they can afford, but especially the SME will be big challenges. So
Right.
this kind of thing. And the brand things, there is no legal charges, legal binding. That is the big problem. How we can make them accountable? Like see the Rana Plaza things. How many brands are signing the accord? Especially American brand. They are by American government. They are so kind about the workers in different country, but they are not push pressure to their company like about the human rights issues and things. So that as a consumer, as a activist, as a American or European citizen, you people as a activist, as a consumer, you have right to also campaign and criticize, also fight. So how we can give, they got the penalty.
Right. And I think this is where there's a short-term work, right, Nazma, of us needing to make sure that we're continuing to engage with the brand executives, continuing, as I had mentioned, the brands that remain on our pay up petition. So for those of you, who are asking this question about data, know that we are working as a coalition very carefully to make sure that the information we're sharing is as accurate as it can be, knowing that it's evolving very rapidly. But in talking to Kalpana, in talking to Nazma, making sure that workers are getting paid and hearing from suppliers, at least on deep record, who's paying, who's not paying. And so, the smaller, medium enterprises, obviously that makes up a lot of volume of orders, and that's going to be the next phase of our campaign, is how do we make sure that some of those brands are paying up. But one of the reasons we went after the bigger brands is because they have the name recognition, but frankly they also have the resources. They should, if Target can pay up, why can't Walmart? JCPenney, Kohl's, exactly, JCPenney, Kohl's, they have investment from BlackRock. It's like, for the Arcadia Group, which is, Topshop, has had good online sales. Why aren't they honoring their commitments? I think it would be good for people on the call to know that, from an immediate relief standpoint, what Nazma's amazing organization is needing is really support. What we've been doing on the back end is trying to mobilize some foundations, but there is also a GoFundMe account where we verified through Shimmy Technologies, who knows someone directly in Bangladesh, that the money will reach Nazma Appa's hands. So if you care, whether you can give $5, $10, anything, we have raised about 6,000 on the GoFundMe, that this is again going directly in the hands of furloughed or workers without severance, especially as orders have started to dry up in May and look quite bleak for the summer.
We're going to share more information. We're going to share the links to those pages, and I'm also going to show those to you in a minute. But before I close the Q&A, I just want to kind of pull it all together with, again, tying together a few of the questions into one, which speak to how these brands are not legally held accountable for not paying workers. And Nazma, you spoke to that contracts do not legally bind. But I think one of the important kind of secondary questions was, what role do we have, as consumers and as activists, to help either push for this legislation or hold brands accountable in the public realm so that they receive that pressure to be accountable? So the question is kind of two-part in terms of what role, does the government have to control this, and what role can we take as activists to help support that?
Yeah. So, as I said, in the short term, what we're needing is really urgent relief, as we did with the Garment Workers Center, as we need, Nazma needs money in her hands so that workers who are already in a precarious situation, what the data was showing was, workers are reporting eating less because they haven't made their full wages. Most of them are already living hand to mouth, and especially as workers start to get sick, what's to happen? Of the question of the legal liability, I know that through BRAC and other institutions, they are looking at the legal liabilities. Can brands actually have this clause, force majeure, which says major forces at play, and hence for orders that are already produced, that have been shipped or are in the process of being shipped, we have no liability, we're not going to pay. I'm not a legal analyst, so I can't speak to how far any of that will go. Will there be lawsuits down the pipeline? But I think, to Nazma's point, time is of the essence, and especially as some brands file for bankruptcy, especially as some factories have already started to shutter because of the illiquidity, we don't have the luxury of time to be thinking about this from a legal precedent and whether this was even legal or not. I think the other thing for people to know is a lot of factories operate with purchase orders. So these are not letters of credit. There's nothing sort of extended with the bank. There's no legal liability. And so when brands are essentially asking factories to produce orders, and saying we will pay you in the 30, 60, 90 days, there's no way really to hold brands accountable. And to Nazma's point, especially when you have intermediaries and trading companies like Li and Fung, that gets even more murky in terms of chasing the brands. But I think as we think of this as a reset moment and how we want this industry to be in the future, and for those of us thinking about the future of fashion, certainly payment structures and how we're thinking about a true partnership between manufacturers and brands should absolutely be on the table. Shouldn't brands be putting a percentage down if the factories have to buy fabric, if the factories are needing to pay workers? In a pandemic, what are the kinds of responsibilities? And then I really hope that this is a renaissance movement for unions, for protections, for organizing work. I've been really heartened here sitting in the United States with just how much of our community has rallied. How many of you are listening into this call, how many of you have already donated your time or your money. I really do think that whether it's essential workers right here at home, us thinking about workers getting sick in Amazon warehouses, or thinking about the 50,000 workers in LA that we've been campaigning for, or our sisters, the 4.1 million in Bangladesh, this really is us rising up to realize that social protections has to be part and parcel of this industry. And Nazma, what would you say as we close out questions? Just what is your dream for the women who make our clothes? You were been in this industry since you were so young. How would you want this reset moment to be in the future?
My dream is the fair purchasing practice. This pandemic, I learned a lot of how the supply chain is exploited workers and the supplier, and still like some of the goods, the shipment they should send in March, but they are asking if this shipment goes to next year March. So this kind of things we don't want. But I want, and after the pandemic, what is my dream? Because we learn good, all the good things and bad things. That is why we need to be. We don't want to sew a shop. We want fair price and fair wage. We want freedom of association, collective bargaining, and women empowerment, gender issues, and we want social protection system. We don't have that, and we need also, because it's not only coronavirus. There might be Bangladesh is a big risk on the climate change, because it will be affected. So how we can protect our nature, how we can protect our workers? If workers are collapsed, the whole business, whole world will be collapsed.
Domino effect, exactly.
Yeah. So that is why even we need to more capacity and build capacity supplier, how to negotiation proper price, and also the workers, how to negotiation their ways, their benefit and productivity, because this system need to be system-wide, because we are asking for price. Nobody is helping us. That is why productivity and our rights that need to be matched and should be that this is the right time. I'm asking all over the world people, be stand and be honest, be sincere, be dedicated for transparent for everyone. Don't exploit the poor country like Bangladesh, South Asia, Ethiopia, because you people are taking privilege as a consumer. You are also buy one, get free, get good sale, but where it's come, it's from us. So need to be shame. So we need to be how we can overcome the shame and make the accountable as a consumer. The brand should be fair, because first problem and troublemaker is a brand, then supplier, and its affect workers.
And at the end of the day, it's the women that are most impacted.
Possibly what, whose duty is what that need to do. And please, let's brand, union, supplier, government, stakeholder, sister, brother, need to be work together and make better world. We want different world, because now we are anger. We need to hope, we need to action. That I want from you guys, and thank you. And please support, not to cancel the order. We don't want charity, we want work. See the COVID-19, we didn't care. We went to work, we made your clothes, but we didn't get our full salary. It's also shame, and it's very hard to say, because as a mother, as a woman, because they are working and they will not pay the full salary of April and March, or what will be happen in June, July if we have no order. Millions of girls will lose the job, and sweatshop will be increased, exploitation will be increased. Stop, and please help. We don't want charity. We want work. We want fair price, fair job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nazma. Thank you so much for sharing. Nazma is bringing up the point that brands need to be held accountable, but what's so incredible about Remake and the work that we do is we show how you as consumers and as activists can hold brands accountable through your activism, by using your voice, by speaking through social media and telling them what you demand and telling them who you choose to shop with. I would like to share, please allow me to share the link to Nazma's page here, so you can see the GoFundMe, excuse me, let me post this here for you guys. So you can see the GoFundMe page here for Nazma's campaign. We're also going to put the link to that in the chat. Again, please, Caroline, I know you put it already, but if you can pop it in again for everyone that's looking.
And I think one thing for people to know here really is, you know, the foundations that we've been knocking on doors, particularly for the corporate foundations, have been very slow moving. You know, there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in getting the foundations to get money to, while Nazma is really doing God's work, you know, with the workers day in, day out. And so this was a very quick way for us to be able to support the incredible work that she's doing. How many workers are in your, it's 700,000, right, Nazma, within your coalition, within the Awaj Fund? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The website says 740,000, and they have 22 offices and community centers throughout Dhaka and the Chittagong region to serve these women. If you cannot donate because you yourself are impacted because of COVID and losing your income, please understand how valuable your voice is. So you can share the link to this. You can talk about attending this call. You can talk about what you've learned to the community that follows you, and you can use your voice to impact someone who does have the ability to share. Because, you know, what Nazma is speaking to and all the work that we do at Remake is about creating a global community, because we realize the impact that we can have as consumers when we all lift our voices together, and when we can get more people involved.
If you look at the next slide, there's a way to use your voice, right? If you can't use your wallet, because we have lots and lots of ways to engage all of you. And so as I shared, you know, when we put up this petition, we thought, well, people are sheltering in place, college campuses are closed, maybe your attention will be somewhere else. And we were just heartened how within a month we have hit over, I think this slide is a little old, I was looking this morning, and it's now 12,000 signatures. I think the thing that's important to know is that the CEOs, CFOs of the brands get the signatures. We've also written to them twice over the last month with all of your signatures attached. That's what helped us get Tesco from the not paying to the paying line. That's what helped get Next to do the same. For those of you who are asking, how can we keep up with this on our platform, remake.world, right on the landing page, we have brand updates of who's paying and who's not paying as we walk into May. Walmart, CNA, JCPenney, the brands I've mentioned, Gap in particular, we're going to continue to be petitioning and engaging with the executives because to Nazma's point, especially as workers have now, not just to make PPE, but just gone back to work, really putting them in a lot of economic hardship, but also we're really worried about their health. We're needing these things to come in.
Absolutely. And Nazma spoke to the fact that, a lot of us over here are privileged to be sheltered from these effects. But if you're feeling helpless and you feel like you want to help women who are all the way on the other side of the world and who do make your clothing, donating to these funds, signing these petitions, using your voice through social media will really help you flex your advocacy muscles and believe in your empowerment, because it really does make a difference. And it's how we've gotten this attention so far. And it's how we've got a lot of these brands to pay attention. Our Instagram is at Remake Our World. And we really encourage you to follow us, to see the work that we're doing. If this has been exciting and encouraging and inspiring to you, please know that there is so much work left to be done. And there are so many ways that you can contribute. You can follow to stay in touch with what's going on. You can sign up for our newsletter, which is a way to keep up, with the most timely news. Only once a month. We produce very high quality, well-researched content, and we never spam you. Caroline's going to put a link to sign up for our newsletter as well. And finally, if you'd like to be an ambassador like myself, you can host these important conversations. You can write, you can create art for our movement. You can show the ways in which you embrace a sustainable lifestyle and share that with others. You can fill out an application on our website. I promise it only takes just a couple minutes, and we'll send you the link to that as well. So as we draw to a close, I want to tell you how grateful we are that you've taken this time to join us, to listen to the stories of Nazma, and that she can share on behalf of the workers in Bangladesh, because that's, what's really incredible about the shelter in place time is the ability to connect as a global human family. A lot of us are worried about the impacts of our health and on our planet. And so if you're feeling that and you really want to do something, this is a very impactful way that you can use your voice and can share with others. So, please sign our petition. Donate to the fund if you're able, and stay engaged. We thank you so much. We're gonna make these brands pay up, and we're gonna hold them accountable, and we do that with your support.
Absolutely.
For staying up so late, and thank you all. Next month, we're going to focus our call on the future of fashion, and that's going to be really, really interesting and exciting as well. So thank you to our fearless leader, Aisha, as always.
Absolutely. And if I were to just tell everyone, what Nazma said is so important. This is really about a sisterhood. And I see it and I feel it with our community of change makers, Rebecca from LA, Caroline, who's been, furiously sending you all links. She runs our ambassador program along with Sam. Nazma and I have never met, but we call each other sisters because really there is that solidarity. We won't forget the people that make our clothes in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. And so just thank you so very much, everyone, for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you all. We greatly appreciate it. Stay safe. Thank you, Nazma.
Thank you, all of, and in solidarity, all sister.